Pastor Bonhoeffer, thanks for joining us. 2 days after Hitler became chancellor, you gave a radio address warning about the dangers of a leader who becomes an idol. They cut you off mid-sentence. You were 26 years old. You spent the next 12 years fighting, first with words, then with the resistance, and finally from a prison cell. You were executed 3 weeks before the war ended. So I'm going to ask you the question that defines your entire story. How does it happen? How does a civilized country, educated, cultured, institutionally sophisticated, hand itself over to a dictator?
It is a heavy question, one I wrestled with until the very end. You see, democracy does not perish suddenly or in one moment. It collapses through silence, through compromise, and through the creeping paralysis of fear. I watched the institutions that should have stood guard, the church, the universities, the judiciary, one by one capitulate. The German Christians embraced the swastika, finding cheap grace in comfort and conformity. Silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak. Not to act is to act. The good people, they prioritized their security over moral clarity. That was the true tragedy. The descent incremental until the darkness is absolute.
You watched the German church capitulate. The Deutsch Christian, the German Christians aligned with the Protestant church with Nazi ideology. Pastors took loyalty oaths to Hitler. Jewish Christians were expelled from congregations, and most of the church just went along. You helped found the confessing church in opposition, but you were the minority. In America right now, large segments of the evangelical church have aligned with this president, not just politically, but theologically. He's been called God's chosen. He held a Bible for a photo op after clearing protesters with tear gas. Pastors who criticize him lose their congregations. You watched the church become a tool of the authoritarian power in Germany. What do you recognize in what's happening with the American church?
The parallels are chilling and demand contemplation. What I see is the same dangerous path. The confusion of a political leader with a spiritual one, the manipulation of faith for power. Cheap grace becomes the opiate, promising salvation without the cost of discipleship, without the moral courage. When pastors trade their prophetic voice for proximity to authority, they surrender the very essence of their calling. I saw this in Germany, the acceptance of the Aryan paragraph, the abandonment of Jewish Christians. When the church no longer critically confronts power, but embraces it, it betrays its purpose and inevitably weakens the democratic fabric.
The Enabling Act. March 1933, the Reichstag voted to give Hitler the power to pass laws without them. Parliament basically voted itself into irrelevance, and it was legal. In the United States, Congress has passed legislation allowing the president to abolish federal agencies without a congressional vote. They refuse to assert war powers over Iran strikes. They've blocked their own oversight investigations. The administration has defied roughly 1 in 3 court orders, and Congress has done nothing about it. You watched a parliament hand over its authority and call it patriotism. Is the American Congress doing basically the same thing in slow motion?
Yeah, this is a powerful comparison and it demands our attention. The Enabling Act in 1933 was a crucial moment. It was not just a legal maneuver. It was a profound betrayal of institutional duty. Parliament surrendered its power, driven by fear, ambition, and the seductive embrace of cheap grace, the illusion that silence could secure safety. When a legislative body declines its fundamental checks, refuses oversight, and tolerates the defiance of its own laws, it mirrors a dangerous path. The good people who said nothing in Germany believed their silence was sustainable, but silence in the face of evil is itself evil. Not to speak is to speak, not to act is to act. The subtle corrosion of democratic norms often feels slow, like a creeping fog, but the cost of such surrender is ultimately paid in blood and liberty. Vigilance is not just a virtue, it is a necessity.
The Civil Service Purge, the law for the restoration of the professional civil service, April 1933. Hitler removed Jews and political opponents from government jobs, and he replaced them with party loyalists. In America, there's Schedule F, a proposal to reclassify tens of thousands of career federal employees as political appointees, hired and fired based on loyalty. The administration has already fired prosecutors, inspectors generals, and career officials who were seen as insufficiently loyal. 300,000 federal employees were removed by Doge. You watch the German civil service get turned into a party apparatus. How far along is this?
The parallel is deeply troubling. What you describe was a foundational step in the Gleichschaltung, the synchronization of all aspects of German life. The law for the restoration of the professional civil service was an assault on the very independence and objectivity of the state. When loyalty to a party becomes more important than duty to the Constitution, the immune system of a democracy begins to collapse. We saw how the bureaucracy transformed from a guarantor of order into an instrument of oppression. The purge against Jewish and politically unreliable civil servants was a precursor to much greater evil. One must always ask, where does the line between political loyalty and duty to the principle truly end? Silence in the face of such dismantling is not guiltless.